tend to speak from the heart, but there's some things that I really wanted to make sure that I included. And Bruce is right. When he approached me about doing this, I need to step back a minute. When he first asked me to do this, as of 3 weeks ago, I was working for a nonprofit here in town, and I have spent the last, despite what you read in the bio, I've spent the last 12 years in the closet. No one at work knew I was a lesbian. Because there was a cost. And I want to talk to you tonight and tell you there's a cost for being in the closet, and there's a cost to being out. And so I made a few notes because my history goes back to 1975, before some of y'all were born. So I hope you'll allow me to read a few things, but also to talk to you and share a little bit of my story. Thank you for inviting me. I'm probably older than you think I am. I am a child of the 50s. I grew up in a much different time than many of you. I could tell you stories of how I wrote my thesis on a typewriter with carbon paper, but that's a different story for another time. I can tell you also firsthand what it was like as a participant in the gay movement, in the gay community, in a time before AIDS. And it saddens me to know that some of you don't know that. And I'm hoping in my lifetime there'll be a generation born that won't know AIDS either. But back in the 70s, that was before texting and cell phones, back in the 70s, there was much going on in Dallas. And you've heard so many of the Dallas Way stories and people sharing their lives. As I was sitting there listening and talking, Rod mentioned about doing the show. I was there that night. I remember Bill and Terry pushing him. You know, when Harriet Earhart talked, I remember holding Don Baker's hand. You know, as I drove down Cedar Springs and I saw the Nelson Thibodeau Clinic, those weren't just names. Harvey Milk isn't a movie to me. Those were my friends. Those were my family. So I have to tell you, to be very honest, that my story might make you uncomfortable or mad. You might not like something I say, and by the time I finish, you might not like me. It's not easy to witness, to hear about, or live through issues of oppression, whether it takes the form of racism, ageism, homophobia, misogyny, etc. Someone asked me once why we worked so hard and why we put so much effort into that very first March on Washington. We worked to create a community, a city, a world that would be a safer place to be who we were. It was a struggle then, and as each of you know, it is difficult to live with discrimination. You might not walk the very unique path that I do as a black, working class, fat, older lesbian with mobility issues. Back in the olden days, like even before my time, there was a concept called passing. Some very light-skinned blacks lived secret lives, pretending to be white, out of fear for what the full knowledge of their black identity would mean. More than just the denial of housing or employment or opportunities, being black in America meant that they were very real targets of hatred and violence. The color of their skin made them less than. everyone else. Out of fear, out of wanting a better life for themselves and their families. They chose to pass because they could. The cost of a life in the closet is huge. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, when the Dallas Way started, my heart skipped a beat. I was so excited, and it was bittersweet because I wanted to be a part of it from the very beginning. In my description, and what Bruce didn't put in there among my attributes is I am not a geek. I'm probably the last person in America to get on Facebook. I've only been there less than 2 years, and I was out of shame because we went out to dinner, a big group of people, so I was going away, and I said, I'm really going to miss you. This was a coworker, and I'm really going to miss you. They were moving away, and she said, well, you can follow me on Facebook and keep track of me there. To which I said, I'm not on Facebook. You could have heard a pin drop. It was just like, what? They looked at me like I was a Martian, and so I was shamed into getting on Facebook. But as I slowly learned a little bit, got to remember I'm in the closet, right? No one knows I'm a lesbian. So I had to be very careful to keep things compartmentalized, and I was very selective about who I would friend. Well, who were my friends? My friends were my gay and lesbian and kinky family that I have been loving and socializing and doing social justice and fighting all these years with. Those are the requests that kept coming, and I'd be like, I don't see that one. Just leave that alone. Don't answer that. Well, when 3 weeks ago, when I resigned from a position that was killing me because I couldn't be out and couldn't share my life or my wife, the very next day, I'm just sending friend requests. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know you've been waiting, George Harris. Here you go. You bet, Jack. You're in. Mike Anglin, I love you still. I mean, all of them. And it's like this whole world opened up that all these people that sat in committee meetings and talked about whether having lesbian in Dallas Gay Alliance was important, whether we needed that word lesbian, don't lesbians know that they're included. And there was a way that certain men in our community could say lesbian that made it sound like a really dirty thing, and not in the good way. So back in the day, yeah, we debated whether lesbian should be in there. But we also saw things were happening around the country that were happening in a different way than they were happening here. There were people who literally were dying every single day because they were gay. And so there was a small group of people who they were family. You know, you were talking about your wonderful mother, and I was very active in the gay and lesbian community here until my mother had cancer and needed me to come home, and so I dropped my life here. But my mom had met Bill and Terry, and when I came out to my parents, was also connected to the gay and lesbian movement. Because right before the March on Washington, we were at one of our many steering committee meetings, and someone mentioned, has everybody come out to your parents because the march might be on the news. So after much, that just sort of seemed to make a lot of sense, and I loved my parents, and so I told my mom. And my mom, like your mom, wanted the best for me. And all she said was, I just want you to be happy. And so when my mother called, she was so sick and didn't want hospice care. She wanted me to come home and take care of her. She, in that conversation, mentioned Bill and Terry. And she said, I know you have family there. but I need you here. And she was so proud of the work that I did in the community. When I got an award from the National Leather Association as Woman of the Year, my brother and his wife came and attended and were there to honor me and be a part of that. So when I step back and look at why did we do what we did, it's because we wanted people to have that feeling of belonging. We wanted to make sure that it was a safer world for them than the one that a lot of people were having. And the Dallas way was very different from other places. Dallas wasn't San Francisco. Dallas wasn't even Houston. There was a Dallas way. I mean, we went to so many city council meetings and meetings behind the scenes and board meetings, but we didn't go in, throwing Molotov cocktails. We went in, dressed the Dallas way, trying to make things happen. My mother used to tell a family story of me being 4 years old, and some company said to me, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I've heard this story so many times, and it still gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. But I mean, without missing a beat, I looked up and I just said, "I just want to make a difference in the world," because that's how my parents were. I said I just wanted to make a difference, and hopefully, as I was thinking about tonight and what I've done in the community and how much we've changed, I hope that I have made a difference in my community, because there were so many times that I was the only woman there or the only person of color there. When Rod talked about, I can't see you in the dark, Rod, I know you're there somewhere. When Rod talked about having to have 3 ID because they were drag queens, there was also a long period we had to have three, not just 3 ID, you all of you have 3 IDs right now in your wallet. Do you have 3 picture IDs? We had to have 3 picture IDs, closed-toed shoes, and it's so much ingrained in me. Tonight when I was getting dressed, I actually had 2 pairs of shoes and picked the closed-toed shoes because I was coming to a gay bar. And speaking of coming out, I've never been at S4 before. Oh my God. Bill, Terry, John Thomas, my colleagues, my crew, my family would have died if they could have seen this place. Oh my God, this is marvelous. Who has an elevator in a bar and a stage with lights that you're not having to drag from home? Anyway, I wanted to tell you that why we did what we did is we wanted to make it a safer world. And hopefully we did. But the fight isn't over. I can remember Bruce Monroe when he was this young whippersnapper coming up. And it makes me so proud to look around and see that there are men and women here, because there were times in the Dallas community when I was the only woman in the room. There were times when I was the only person of color. And it's still not perfect, you all. We've got a long way to come. So I don't mean to shock any of you, and this might be shocking. Racism is alive and well in Dallas, Texas. And as you could tell from the voting rights that have been attacked, it's not just Dallas. The world is a crazy place right now. It was so exciting to look at the rally yesterday, and those of Bruce and a few others can tell you I've become a little Facebook junkie and news junkie. But that excitement over things are getting better, things are changing, they see who we are, they know that what we're about is wanting to live our lives to make a difference and love one another. That excitement is why we did what we did back in the 70s. So um, it's interesting to know what to pick and choose here to share with you. And maybe there'll be another opportunity, and I'll be glad to tell you stories from the olden days. Um, I can't leave without telling you that there was so much that we gained, but there was so much that we lost. So many of the men that are no longer here, they were more than just names. You may go down Cedar Springs and see, or go down and see the John Thomas Center or Bill Nelson. That's my note. I know we're supposed to turn our phones off, but I was a teacher, so we can talk. So I knew I needed a help to shut up. Um, they were my contemporaries. They were my family. They were champions for justice, and they knew that staying in the closet wasn't a choice for them. And there was an expression back in the late 70s, I think, that, if you saw somebody, we never outed anybody back then unless they were doing the wrong thing, but there was an expression that said, "Oh, do you think so-and-so is family?" Meaning, are they gay? Well, we were a family, and we wanted to create a community in a city, in a state, in a country where we were equal and clothes were the only things in our closets. Thank you.